Hi guys, welcome back. It's your host Craig, and today we're going to be talking about something that's a bit of, a hot debate on certain forums or in videos and stuff like that, and just generally just going to be talking about the drones in Ghost Recon Breakpoint. Since we're so close to the release of Ghost Recon Breakpoint, let's have a little talk about that. So, today joining us on this video, I'm a fellow member of the Task Force 21. I want to say a big hello to Mags. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to do this with me.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
So, let's just go down there. So, Mags, you have a lot of experience with drones in your career history. So what makes you an expert on drones in that sense?
I don't know that it's fair to say that I'm an expert on really much of anything, especially drones or UAVs. However, I do work in the industry, so I think I have a little more information than the average person.
Oh, so you work in the industry. So what do you do exactly? If you can tell me, of course.
I'm a defense contractor for the United States Navy, and I work on a very specific reconnaissance UAV.
No, that sounds really cool, actually.
It sounds cool, but it's actually kind of boring.
So if you don't mind, let's just give just a bit of background, I guess. How did you get that job?
Well, after I got out of the Navy, I worked as a defense contractor and on a bunch of different contracts for a bunch of different systems, and eventually I landed this job.
Okay, so let's have a quick little thought on Breakpoint before we dig into your specialty. So what's your thoughts on Breakpoint?
I'd say that I'm cautiously optimistic. I really enjoyed the beta, and I just can't wait to sink my teeth into the whole game and see what it's all about.
That's awesome. I think we're on the same thinking there as well. So let's go into the world of Breakpoint and to basically, a lesser extent, Wildlands. There's a lot of stuff going on with drones and UAVs on the battlefield. What do you think of that?
I think that it accurately reflects what the battle space is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years and farther out. And frankly, it fairly accurately reflects what the battle space looks like now. Drones and UAVs are already common in areas of conflict around the world, as we see in the news even here and now today, and it's only going to become a more ubiquitous part of national doctrines and strategies and military tactics.
So let's say, do you think Breakpoint gets part of it right?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay, let's start simple then. Let's say, how realistic are the depictions of drones, specifically the recon drone each ghost gets their hands on?
The only thing that I can see as being unrealistic is the level of miniaturization and the compact nature of the drones themselves. But that's only in comparison to today's drone technology, and that's really only in my experience. But in 5 years, around the time frame that this game is set, I'd be surprised if drones were as big as the ones you see in the game.
So let's say in relation to that, the sync shot drones.
Well, frankly, if the military thinks that a drone could fit a gun on it, I'm pretty sure that there's a contract or a program out there for a company to develop a drone that has a gun on it. The only thing that I can see preventing something like the sync shot drones from being real is the level of miniaturization again that you see in the game, as well as the amount of overall computation required to ensure that they can find their target, hold their target as that target moves, like when you see a guard walking around, and then to fire on when the command is given. To be clear, it's not that the computing can't be done today, just that it can't be done in the way that it's shown in game. You probably need a base station, a server, something like that, for the sync shot drones to coordinate through. And when the moment comes, or at this moment, we aren't able to miniaturize that stuff to the scale where a lone operator could carry it all and do all of the other stuff that you see them doing in the game.
So let's say another example of drone, which is very clear present danger on Aurora. So I take it that drone swarms aren't possible.
Quite the opposite, actually. They're extremely possible, very doable. As I understand it, they're in the game. They're released from base stations or silos of some sort around Aroa and just run into whatever they're being targeted for. If you fit a large enough server in that base station or silo that they're released from, I think that'd pretty much take care of it. We already have the technology here and now, today, to coordinate drones to work in a similar way to the cooperative, let's call it flocking, that you see in the game. The only issue I can think of is that the level of programming and the computational speed required for that sort of swarm logic. Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if we see drone swarms like those protecting Aroa coming online in the real world for air defense in the next 10 years or so. Probably at first as an unmanned point defense system in forward deployed combat zones, but eventually I wouldn't be surprised if airports or metropolitan centers started using them.
That's kind of actually scary thought to think of right there.
Maybe I see where you're coming from, but technical technological advancement of that nature has so many trickle down or second order effects that I'm actually really excited by the possibilities.
So with that a little bit out of the way, let's talk about unmanned vehicles.
Okay.
So with that in mind, could you give us like a brief analysis of, or in an overall sense, how realistic, how accurate Breakpoint is?
Honestly, I think it is a fairly inaccurate representation of UAVs, UGVs, unmanned weapons, and the like.
So wait, so how so actually?
This is going to be the part that surprises a lot of people, I think, and I'm really excited to talk about it. Ubisoft, I think, for balancing reasons, has significantly nerfed and lessened the capabilities that real world versions of the unmanned systems you see in game would actually have, with, I think, the one possible exception of the Behemoth.
Really? So they've lessened, or as you said, nerfed in what way? Is out of curiosity.
Available October 4th.
Well, let's
Pre-order now
take
for guaranteed
as an
beta
initial
access.
example the unmanned machine guns that I encountered, I'm sure you ran into
Oh yeah.
around the Skeltech facilities. Yeah. Okay, so given the level of technology on display from other weapon systems around Aroa, the other UAVs, UGVs, drones, and the like, we should expect that those stationary defense systems would be capable of spotting you from much greater distances and would be able to fire with a lot higher accuracy than you see in game. There would be pattern recognition programs running. They'd be linked to infrared and thermal identification systems. Those would be installed in them. Not to mention the simple expedient of RFID badges uh, that would prevent one of those guns from accidentally firing on its friendlies. So if they were true to life, in a sense, they would have to be destroyed or otherwise dealt with at much greater ranges than you actually are forced to in game, long before you get to close to a facility. And if you didn't, and you entered a facility and were even on the perimeter of the facility, and you were spotted by one of these things, it would be a much worse, much harsher consequence than you actually see playing.
So in just in the sense of it, that wouldn't be a lot of fun to most Ghost Recon players.
No, I don't think it would, which is why I say that Ubisoft seems to have decided on making specifically these stationary systems, although I think it applies to all of the UAVs and such in the game, but specifically right now, these stationary systems. I think it's decided on nerfing them and specifically nerfing them in such a way that their visual ID ranges and their weapon accuracy are more in line with the guard's AI in game, which I think is a good thing.
Oh, so let's just say for argument's sake or debate's sake, what else did you what else did Ubisoft do wrong with these unmanned vehicles?
Okay, well, look at the Azrael drone. I'm not entirely certain what size it is. It was either large and at a relatively high altitude or medium, small-ish, and at a low altitude. If I had to guess, I'd assume it was the second. It was medium, small, and flying low and slow, say the size of a T-45 Goshawk, one of those training jets used around the world. I'd have to guess that it was about that size, flying low and slow.
Okay, so let's say that seems about right, and well, those drones were difficult to hide from the beginning anyway. So
Exactly my point. So if that UAV, the Azrael UAV, had the ability to ID you as far away as it was, why wouldn't those same identification systems be on every other platform on Aroa, like the unmanned guns we were just talking about?
if I had to say, it would probably be size restrictions.
I hate to go into this much technical detail because it's probably going to bore some people, but that what's probably happening in the Azrael UAVs is that it has a downlink to a ground facility that does the actual computations, the actual processing. The only size limitations to worry about would be the camera, uh, and it would be easy to equip that same suite of cameras and communications gear to those unmanned gun systems.
Well, by the sounds of it, they're two entirely different systems.
That's true. But speaking from my time in the Navy, as well as my time as a defense contractor, you can have two totally different pieces of equipment built for roughly similar purposes, and though you'll find that those two systems will have roughly the same ideas governing them.
What do you mean by that?
All right, so in the Navy, I was I worked on the Aegis combat system, which is an anti-air warfare and ballistic missile defense platform. It's actually very similar to the Army's Patriot missile system. They're both anti-air and ballistic missile defense systems. They're both fielded by different branches, and they're in totally different environments. One is, of course, used on the ocean. One is ground-based. But if you really look at them, the only real difference operationally are the engagement distances and mobility. Again, one's on the ocean and one's ground-based. They use different radar sets, but both radars are phased array, and they accomplish pretty much the same tasks. The equipment and the system architecture may be different to a degree, but they end up accomplishing roughly the same job in the same way, roughly. So coming back to Breakpoint, if Skeltech has the technology to equip certain systems on one piece of equipment, it would be odd to me if they didn't use similar equipment for a similar overall purpose.
Alright, so I think I understand. So if Ubisoft has done that through, like, I think these unmanned systems, would it be a lot harder to defeat then?
Well, it actually gets worse.
Lovely. How worse does it get?
Look, the Azrael drone can ID a ghost at a certain range. So what happens next?
Well, with my experience with it, it usually fires a flare at us.
Exactly. Really incredibly accurately fires a flare at us. Every time that I got spotted in the game, and it was more times than I care to admit, uh, that flare ended up literally between my feet.
That's incredible and crazy accurate for a system that's flying in the air.
Exactly. So here's the question. If it can fire a flare that accurately, why can't it fire a 40 millimeter round that accurately?
Oh,
Yeah, see, Ubisoft could have made this a shooter version of Dark Souls with how much and how easily they could kill us. Not to mention that they could just as easily have made the Azrael, say, loiter on station overhead and basically be a smaller, unmanned version of an AC-130 gunship.
that's slightly terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
Well, let's just say for debate's sake, it's just designed for reconnaissance.
Okay, let's say it is. Well, I actually happen to work on a reconnaissance UAV, so I can speak with some authority on this. So let's say it's just for recon. What do you think it's going to be capable of?
It's going to be able to find targets.
Right. What else do you think? Is
Um,
that going to be all it's capable of?
uh, would it not be though? Like its primary function at least?
Well, of course not. But you see, and this is the defense contractor in me coming out. If you're building something under contract, uh, trying to think of the best way to word this. If you're building something under contract, because why else would you build these sorts of systems without some sort of guarantee that nations would buy that?
Well, given the sense that is that what's going on really. So I thought like Skeltech was either just a Facebook type company or, this world's version of SpaceX and practically what most times they're
Well,
building things for fun.
yeah, but Facebook sells our information to companies making ads, and SpaceX is selling space on its rockets to NASA. They're making money. They're doing things for more than just fun.
Oh.
Well, companies don't exist just to make stuff because it would be cool. Although it seems like Elon Musk has tried that on a couple of occasions. Anyway, uh, this specific Recon UAV, if it's anything like the one I work on, and I'm speaking from an in-game, in-universe point of view, if it's anything like the ones that I work on, it's going to be expected to do more than just fly around gormlessly, aiming a camera at the ground and firing flares at whatever trips the algorithm it has set up to identify bad guys. If this were a real world product, the recon version of the Azrael drone, because I'd have to assume that there were multiple versions of it, but the recon version of the Azrael drone, like we see in game, would have, in addition to its thermal and infrared cameras, like we've talked about, it would have data processing capabilities, probably through an uplink downlink system of some sort. It would have communications repeaters, which would increase the line of sight capability. Well, it would increase the communications ranges for line of sight systems. And this is where it gets really scary. It would have laser designation. That's what the military would want from a quote unquote recon unit.
So why doesn't the Azrael have all or some of that?
I'd have to assume that it's because Ubisoft doesn't hate us. I mean, can you imagine this thing flying overhead and seeing you, then staying above you constantly, tracking you faultlessly, and providing real time information to the wolves as to your exact pinpoint location?
When you say it like that, then yeah, that could be bad.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, so let's move on to something that's kind of scary, the Behemoth.
Great.
Alright, so did you get to fight a Behemoth in the beta, just out of curiosity?
I did actually. Myself and a couple of other TF-21 members, we were able to take down one as a three-man fire team.
Alright, so with that in mind, what's your thoughts on it?
It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, but it was worse than maybe I wanted.
Could you explain that?
Well, let's look at it in terms of other games, RPGs, for example. If you beat up a machine in another RPG and its glowy bits get exposed, you know you're getting to the halfway or three-quarters point, and those glowy bits are probably weak points of some sort. And that works for an RPG. But in a real world scenario, which is what I'm expecting from Breakpoint, I think understandably so, if I'm shooting at a piece of equipment and its glowing bits are exposed, that thing is, or ought to be, very likely near done. As in, a few rounds into the glowy bits, and we should be able to call it a day. But that wasn't the case in my experience.
So, why shooting the glowing parts, or, cores, or whatever they're called, cause such a quick death?
Well, there was armor protecting those glowing pieces. or cores, if you want to call it that. And you're not going to put armor over something that is already well armored, as you see in game. Those glowing bits seem to be armored in and of themselves. You're not going to put armor over something that is already armored or resistant to bullets. You're going to put armor over something that isn't. So if you break the armor plating over something, chances are, looking at it from a real world perspective, it's vital. If it isn't, then it shouldn't need armor, and shooting it shouldn't do anything. So let me amend my statement. Either the behemoths are made to be more difficult than a real life counterpart would be, for in-game purposes, or in-game they're just extremely poorly designed.
Well, let's not go too far with like, let's say that, the dev team or the Ubisoft team so well designed this. I wouldn't say it's bad.
No, that's not what I meant. I meant that the behemoth, as it exists in the world of the game, must either have been made more difficult to kill by Ubisoft so as to give us a challenge, or Skeltech, uh, Skeltech poorly designed it, and that's the in-game explanation for armor covering armored bits. I'm not bashing Ubisoft. If anything, I'd say I'm bashing Skeltech.
No, that's good in the sense then. Like, that makes a lot of sense. So,
Yeah, again, I just want to reiterate this. I'm not bashing Ubi for the Behemoth's design. I'm just, as I have been, offering a comparison to real world conditions.
so with that in mind and a lot of major points answered and questions asked and stuff like that, how would you like here's a question for you. Like for drones,
Hmm.
what would you change
Hmm.
about them?
That's a really good question. Let me think about that for a second. It would be one of two things, and I think I went into a little bit of detail about it during our conversation here. If I had to, I think I would change the design of the Azrael drone just to make it fall a little more closely in line with real world systems. If you look at the environments and the biomes around Aroa,
Hmm.
uh, I think that a jet powered UAV doesn't make a lot of sense. I think that a helicopter UAV would make more sense from an in-game standpoint. It would be able to get into and out of much tighter spots. It wouldn't be as fast, but it would vastly increase the capabilities. That having been said, I don't know that I'd want to have to fight or deal with the consequences of being a ghost on the ground with a helicopter UAV overhead. So maybe I would just change the Behemoth drone design a little bit so that the armor pieces didn't start falling off until it was much closer to being killed.
So just to reiterate, apologies my pronunciation on that word. It's very late at night here. So
Mhm.
overall, you'd rather if you saw the Azrael to be a more helicopter-based drone where it has more access to different areas and it can be a bit slow but more maneuverable.
I think that would make it more realistic. But again, even now thinking about that, as we've discussed, if it were closer in line with reality, it would be a much scarier machine. So even now, I don't know that I think I'm pretty happy with how quote unquote weak the Azrael drone is. But if from just an immersion point of view, yeah, I think that I would turn the Azrael into some sort of helicopter UAV.
Okay, so to add on to the next part, which was behemoths, you said armor should be a bit more tougher before it starts to fall off.
Not that it would be tougher. This is the Azrael drone suggestion that I made was speaking from an in-game, in-universe point of view. Right now, with the Behemoth, though, I'm talking as a player. The visual design of the damage that you're pouring onto this thing, I would want to see a slight change where the armor pieces didn't fall off until it was closer to death, so it felt at the very least like the damaging the glowing bits that we talked about was what actually killed it. It would make it look like they were vital pieces to be aimed for, if that makes sense.
That makes actually a lot of sense. So, with
Great.
that in mind, with everything out of the way, and I feel a bit more confident that the drones were not nerfed in necessarily the word, like made a little easier to deal
Mm-hmm.
with, and comparing it to a real life situation, I'm quite happy with them. I will be honest, I'm
Yeah.
happy with them. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's a lot of questions answered. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I want to say a big thank you to TF21's very own Mags for taking his time to record this video with us, and I hope this answered a lot of questions for you. It's not every day you get to talk to a semi-expert on UAVs and stuff like that. And of course, once again, big thank you to Mag's service during his time in the Navy. That's coming from
Thank
an
you.
Irishman. but but yeah, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's watched this video so far and have enjoyed it in a sense anyway. Remember to hit the subscribe button if you're new. Remember to hit the like button on the video, and of course you can join our Discord, which will be down in the description section there, so you get a chance to talk with us more and some of our experts on the team as well. And that's pretty much it. So, Mags, once again, big thank you, and we'll see you
Thank you.
next time. Apologies about that. We'll see you next time on RTC. See you guys. Have a good one.